name is Frank Heberer. I served in the infantry in the Army from 1943 until 1948. I spent 5 years on active duty and 28 years in the Army Reserve and retired as a full colonel. For about 14 years of my life, we lived on a farm out from Canton. This farm was had no running water, had no indoor plumbing. It was run by my father, and he had about 7 families who were sharecroppers. My father, when he had married my mother in about 1922, moved to this farm, and we farmed this until 1937 during the midst of the Depression. In 1937, the price of cotton got so low that it wasn't economically feasible to continue the farm. As I recall, about that time, the price of ginned cotton was about a nickel a pound. That seems inconceivable now, but it actually happened. So my father had a rural mail route, and he decided he could just give up the farm, move to Canton, maintain the rural mail route 5 days a week, and raise his family. And this is what he did. To sustain myself financially, I worked on Saturdays in a grocery store from about 6 in the morning to 10 at night for $1, and the government took away 1 cent, 1% for Social Security. So I had 99 cents a week to function on in high school, and we couldn't get too much done. It was, we didn't know any better, really. We thought everybody was poor, and we certainly were out in the country. In 1939, I graduated from Canton High School, a little school in Mississippi, and immediately entered the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, and entered the 4-year ROTC program. So on August the 5th, 1943, I was inducted into the Army at Fort McClellan, Alabama, as a corporal, because you had to be a non-com to go to OCS. So I was sent immediately to Fort Benning at Columbus, Georgia, and started the 13-week OCS program. But I was lucky, and I managed to make it until December 30, 1943, when I was given a 2nd lieutenant's commission in the Organized Reserve Corps. Upon graduation, I was sent to Camp Fannin, Texas, which is in Tyler, Texas, and is an IRTC. That's an infantry replacement training center where draftees came in, and in 4 months, we made soldiers out of them and sent them directly overseas. Well, everything was going along fine until till June the 5th, 1944, and I'd been out on a night problem, an 8-hour night problem, and got in about 4 in the morning, went to sleep, turned on the radio, and D-Day in Europe was almost over.
Then on the 5th day of June, 1944, just as you see them here, a fleet of more than 4,000 ships put out from England. This was D-Day, 4th anniversary of the Battle of Dunkirk, and the Allied armies were striking back.
Well, while I was absorbing this, I got a call from regimental headquarters to come down, and they handed me my orders to go overseas in Europe. So the next day I got on a bus, headed to Canton, Mississippi on 4 days delay en route, told my family goodbye, told my high school sweetheart goodbye, got on the train, went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and then up to Camp Kilman, New Jersey. On the 30th of June, I boarded a transport in a big convoy, and in 15 days across the Atlantic, I landed in England. About a week later, I went across the channel onto the continent. I landed at Omaha Beach and walked up Omaha Beach. There was no problem at that time, about 6 weeks after D-Day. And of course, Omaha Beach is historical. This was the worst beach to be in when we landed on D-Day. It had the greatest casualties. And when I got there about 6 weeks later, everything was very quiet, but I was cognizant of the fact that I was stepping on historical ground. And, you know, it's kind of overwhelming to think of all the people that were killed there, and, you know, just amazing. On the 14th of August, my 22nd birthday, I was assigned to the 30th Infantry Division. And when I got to the 30th Infantry Division, they made me a platoon leader in a platoon in Company F, 120th Infantry, 30th Division, and then I was in the war. We were chasing the Germans across northern France, hoping we wouldn't catch them, and we were moving in towards Belgium. I remember on the 25th of August, we were about 5 miles north of Paris, and that was the day that Paris was liberated. So we moved on into Belgium, and we were fighting, and when we got into Belgium, there was a famous fort there called Fort Emily Ball, and this fort had been built on the Belgian-German border in hopes that it would keep the Germans at bay if they invaded Belgium. Well, it didn't work too well because the Germans dropped paratroopers on top of the fort and took the fort, and they kept it all during the war. When we got there, it was in September 1944, and we were ordered to take the fort. So we attacked the fort, and we did take the fort, and that was where I got the large Nazi flag, was in Fort Epinal. This came from Fort Epinal in Belgium. It might have been the one on top, I don't know. But when we took the fort, it was in there, and I managed to get it away. On the 17th of December, we were located in the Cologne Plain in a quiet area, hoping to be there for Christmas. But on the 17th Sunday, I remember we had just gone to church, and we were feeling good about things, and we got the order that trucks are coming and get on them, and we are going to move you. So that happened, and during the darkness that night on the 17th of December in 1944, we were dumped on a snowy hillside in Belgium, and we didn't have any idea what was going on. And we weren't alone. The top brass didn't know what was going on either. But it turned out that on the 16th of December at daybreak, the Germans had launched a number of offensives on an 80-mile front through the Ardennes forest. And this was the same invasion route that they took in 1940. So there we were, and the Germans were coming, and the tanks were coming, and we were trying to beat them off. And along this area of the forest, the roads are not too good, and the Germans' tanks couldn't get off the roads to maneuver. The weather was bad. The planes weren't flying. We had no air support. And so we were fighting the tanks with the bazookas and anti-tank guns and one thing and another. And this was going on for about a week. During this time, I was directing attacks. The Germans were firing artillery and mortars. And on one occasion, I lost 4 men out of my platoon, and they were killed by artillery. And it's hard to describe how, the tanks are battling, artillery's coming in, the Germans are firing at you with rifles. All our advances were normally made with tanks. Infantry worked with tanks and supported each other, and quite frequently you would have the tank battles between the German tanks, and they were much larger than ours. They mounted an 88 millimeter gun, and we had a 75 millimeter gun. And of course they made terrific noises, and at night could be firing, and you could see the flashes of their guns. It's just difficult to describe all these battle sounds because they're coming at you from all directions. You got mortars coming in, and then you got your artillery. You could hear the shells coming in, and mines you could step on. It's just hard to describe if you weren't there. But the worst, in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, the worst place you could be would be in the infantry platoon. It was just a horrible place to be, and so I realized all along I shouldn't have been in the infantry, but there I was. On December the 24th, we had just had a counterattack against the Germans. I spent the night in the foxhole, undoubtedly the coldest nights of my life. They said that in December of 1944 was the coldest winter that had been in Germany in many years. So when you were going out, if you didn't normally have any place of cover at night. You were out in the open. The attack maybe had bogged down, and you had to dig a foxhole. Every soldier, including the lieutenant, had an entrenching tool, a shovel, that he used to dig a foxhole to get as much protection from the artillery as he could, and to get as much protection from the elements. You would be there all night, freezing, cold, getting very little sleep. Part of the group, the platoon, would have to be on constant alert. You would have to make inspections. Food, basically, you never got any hot food at this time. You got the K ration, which was a ration that included a meal, 4 cigarettes, etc. Or you might get a D bar, which was a big bar of chocolate that you ate. So unless you were off the front lines, you hardly ever got a fresh meal and a hot meal. And so you got up the next morning, like where I was on the 25th. The 24th, we had been in an attack, and it had bogged down, and we were out in the open, in foxholes, freezing, and waiting for daylight to begin the attack. Now, when you've been around a few times, you can hear an artillery shell coming in, and you soon learn from the sound whether it's going to go harmlessly over you or whether it's going to hit next to you, and you can tell. So if you know it's going to hit next to you, you hit the ground, and usually you're pretty safe, because when an artillery shell hits, the shrapnel moves up away from you, so if you're lying prone, you won't get hit. I knew all this, but that particular morning I was standing next to a tank with a motor running, and I didn't hear this shell come in and hit me. And all at once I felt this blow to my back, and I was on the ground. So a piece of shrapnel had gone into my back and created a wound, and I looked around and felt around, and I had movement in my arms and legs, and I said, thank God I've just received $1 million wound. Now, we referred to $1 million wound on the front as a wound that got you out of combat and didn't permanently cripple you. This is the field jacket I was wearing on December 25th, Christmas Day, 1944, when I received that $1 million wound. This got me out of combat and didn't permanently cripple me. It still has the dirt on it from that day in Belgium many years ago. So I held on to it. I don't know why, but there it is. The shrapnel came in the back here. It wasn't that big a piece, but it did get me hospitalized. It just, when it hit me, I was standing up, and it was just like a blow to my back with a bat, and I was suddenly on the ground. We came across on the Queen Mary. Most of the 30th Division was on there. It held about 15,000 troops. And when we came into New York Harbor, the boats were throwing water and this, that, the other, and we were getting a tumultuous reception. And when we got to Hattiesburg, which is about 190 miles from my home of Canton, I called my folks and told them when I was going to arrive at Jackson, Mississippi, which was 20 miles from Canton, and they were to come down and get me. I didn't realize at the time what my parents had gone through, or any parents had gone through, when their soldiers were subject to what mine was subject to. And we were just overjoyed, and at the time I didn't realize what they went through for that time that I was in service. And when they got the telegram from the War Department said I'd been wounded, whether they didn't know how serious it was, so it was just a joyous occasion. At that time, Elizabeth Shipley, my high school sweetheart, was working for Delta Airlines in Atlanta. So she arranged to come to Canton, to her home. She lived in the same town, of course, I did, of course, and I met her. And that was a joyous occasion, although at that time we had not made any plans to get married, but you know, it was just unbelievable. Of course, after about a week, she had to go back to work for Delta in Atlanta, and I had 45 days of rest and recuperations and having fun before I had to go back to Fort Jackson and be deactivated. I have thought many, many times about my time in the service, about how fortunate I was, and frankly, every day I give thanks to God for getting me out of there in the condition that I was in. And of course, on every Christmas day, I think about this. I can't help but think about it. I, of course, am proud to be an American, and to have been able to serve like I did. As far as the big picture of what we had accomplished, I didn't really think too much about that. Later on, I guess, I did think about it, that it was a monumental task, and we came through, but frankly, I was just so happy that the war was over that I was just rejoicing and couldn't wait to get home.